What if the deepest silence of history is not empty, but merely misunderstood? What if the answers to our most fundamental questions about existence and civilization were written down, preserved in dust, waiting for us to develop the necessary humility to read them without prejudice? We tend to look back at the origins of human civilization as a slow, meandering climb out of the primal mud, a gradual process spanning tens of thousands of years. But then there is Sumer, a light that did not flicker into existence, but seemed to ignite with catastrophic suddenness in the Mesopotamian valley between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates, almost 6 millennia ago. Here, fully formed, we find the foundations of nearly everything we call modern, codified law, intricate city planning, advanced hydraulic engineering, sophisticated astronomy, monumental architecture, and, crucially, the very first writing system known to humankind. It is an intellectual shockwave, an anomaly that historians often acknowledge but rarely explain satisfactorily. A civilization appearing seemingly ex nihilo, already operating at a peak efficiency that defies the expected rules of evolutionary progress. This startling realization, that our beginning was not a slow dawn, but a sudden noon, is the precise point where the established narrative begins to fracture, inviting us to look beneath the surface and into the enigmatic heart of the ancient Sumerian tablets. These aren't just dry administrative records. They are the earliest surviving archives of conscious human memory, baked into clay, silent witnesses to a time and events that challenge our deepest conceptions of reality. The sheer volume and density of these cuneiform records, millions upon millions of wedges etched into clay, offer a panoramic view into the mindset of these first city builders. And within this vast library of commerce, hymns, and royal decrees, there whispers a persistent, unsettling echo, the stories of those who came before them, those who taught them, those they called the Anunnaki. These narratives are woven so tightly into the fabric of Sumerian cosmology that separating the myth from the historical account becomes an exercise in intellectual arrogance. They did not treat these beings as abstract deities of nature. They treated them as historical, physical, and highly consequential visitors. If you have ever felt that primal, nagging sensation that a vital piece of our collective memory is missing, that feeling of standing on the edge of a precipice looking down into an abyss of lost time, then you are already participating in this investigation. We must read these tablets, not as fables designed to comfort primitive minds, but perhaps as testimonials recorded by sophisticated witnesses. The implications of this approach are so profound, they demand your full attention. If this journey into the forgotten texts resonates with that deep curiosity buried within you, take a moment now, before we descend further, and consider liking this presentation and subscribing to the channel. Let us know in the comments, what single question about human origins feels most unanswered to you right now? Your reflection becomes part of the shared discovery. The Sumerians tell us, with stark and unflinching detail, that their knowledge, their very civilization, was a direct inheritance, gifted by the Anunnaki, the group whose name translates most compellingly as those who from heaven to earth came. This is not merely a mythological embellishment, it is the foundational principle upon which their entire societal structure was built. We are speaking of beings described as arriving in the long-forgotten past, establishing bases in the fertile delta, not as spiritual projections, but as flesh and blood entities with specific geological missions. They arrived with technology, with clear hierarchies, and with a need that directly intersected with the planetary resources of the Earth. This need, according to the tablets, anchors the entire narrative in a concept far removed from traditional theology: the necessity of gold. The Anunnaki, coming from a specific planet, often linked in translation and conjecture to the astronomical body known as Nibiru, required fine, monoatomic gold dust to repair the diminishing atmosphere of their homeworld. This detail immediately shifts the context from divine intervention to interplanetary resource extraction. The great cycles mentioned in the texts, the Shar cycles, hint at the long orbital period of their world, a period of approximately 3,600 Earth years, suggesting their presence on Earth was governed by these vast, slow, predictable returns. This cyclical nature embeds a sense of cosmic inevitability into the story, suggesting that the arrival and departure of these observing figures were not random events, but scheduled appointments in deep time, marking the start and end of great epochs. It is here that the story of human origins intersects violently with the chronicle of the Anunnaki. After centuries of performing the arduous labor of mining and extracting these necessary minerals themselves, the Anunnaki troops, the Igigi, the lower-ranking laborers, rebelled. The solution proposed by the leadership, notably Enki and Ninhursag, was revolutionary and horrifying: to create a primitive worker, Lulu Amelu, a being capable of carrying the burden of toil. This creation, the genesis of Homo sapiens, was not an act of divine love or perfection, but a desperate, pragmatic genetic intervention. The tablets describe a process of mixing the essence of a native hominid, the Adamu of the clay and the earth, with the essence of the Anunnaki themselves. This is the ultimate missing link narrative, framed not in terms of slow natural selection, but of rapid, purposeful genetic engineering. This revelation forces us to confront the possibility that the explosive leap in cognitive ability and abstract thought that defines our species, the sudden acquisition of language and foresight, was not an accident of evolution, but the intended result of external manipulation. We were, quite literally, designed for a job: to shoulder the burden of the gold mines and sustain the operations of our extraterrestrial creators. This origin story paints humanity as a manufactured subservience, an act of hybridization performed under duress and necessity. It fundamentally reframes the purpose of our existence as described by the people closest to the dawn of civilization. Were these beings benevolent gods, capable of miracles and creation? Or were they simply highly advanced colonial overseers, utilizing biotechnology to solve a labor crisis? The ambiguity remains the key to the mystery, and it defines our current state of inquietude. We carry their genes, the silent signature of their intervention, a heritage of genius and servitude that is still playing out in our daily struggles and aspirations. The earliest Sumerian king lists and administrative texts often blur the line between the reigns of the Anunnaki commanders and the first human rulers, implying a period of direct overlap and tutelage. This wasn't mythology being created for comfort. This was history being recorded for posterity. If we accept the possibility that these beings existed, then the question of their return becomes the most profound query of our time. The tablets speak of great cataclysms, global floods, and the eventual departure of the Anunnaki, promising a return aligned with the vast, astronomical cycles of their home planet. They left behind their knowledge, their observatories, their genetic modification, and the inescapable truth that humanity was, and perhaps still is, a vassal race awaiting the sign of the Nibiru's return. The tablets are not just history. They are a warning encoded in the language of the forgotten. This understanding of human history, as a programmed existence beginning in the minds of ancient Mesopotamia, is a difficult pill to swallow, yet it is the core of what the world's oldest written documents claim to convey. The implications ripple through every aspect of our culture, from our religious texts to our seemingly innate tendency toward hierarchical structure and labor. The question is no longer if something extraordinary happened, but what exactly was transcribed onto the clay and why. That information has been systematically marginalized by mainstream history. If you have traveled this far into the shadows of the past with us, recognizing the weight and significance of the Sumerian inheritance, then you are ready to delve deeper into the specific narratives that document the creation event itself. The next part of our investigation will focus intensely on the Enuma Elish and the Atrahasis, the very epics that detail the chaos of the creation, the rebellion of the Igigi, and the moment the genetic blueprint of the Adamu was conceived in the laboratories of the Anunnaki. We will examine the textual evidence that describes the blending of the blood of the gods with the clay of the earth, seeking to unlock the precise mechanics of our sudden, inexplicable emergence. Therefore, if this journey into the depths of historical shadow and potential technological intervention speaks to your understanding of our hidden reality, subscribe now and hit the bell notification to ensure you do not miss the next transmission. Leave a comment with the single phrase, "We are the inheritance," to signal your participation in this profound search for origins. And when the screen darkens, remember that the most astonishing truths are often found not in the light of day, but in the unsettling whispers of the oldest forgotten texts. Our investigation into the specifics of the creation, the structure of the Anunnaki hierarchy, and the true purpose of the first man awaits. Join us for part 2. The silence that follows a truly destabilizing discovery often speaks volumes louder than any shouted declaration. What if the grand narrative we hold, the slow, arduous climb from the primal dust to the heights of organized civilization, is simply a convenient screen, a widely accepted metaphor masking a truth far more immediate and unsettling? This is the subterranean whisper unearthed from the Mesopotamian clay, the quiet question that lingers in the unsettling geometry of the earliest cuneiform script. We are not merely looking at the beginning of written history. We are grappling with the recorded testimony of beings who claim to have initiated that history, not merely observed it. We must turn our focus now to the physical archives themselves, the seemingly inexhaustible libraries buried beneath the sands of what we call Iraq. These thousands upon thousands of baked clay tablets, meticulously cataloged, translated, and stored in the great museums of the world, are not just economic ledgers or hymns to local deities. They contain a startlingly coherent chronological sequence, a record stretching back into periods that official archaeology dismisses as purely mythological prehistory. This consistent, detailed documentation is where the curiosity transforms into fundamental estrangement. The Sumerians, those astonishingly sudden architects of civilization, presented their origins not as a gradual evolutionary triumph, but as an instantaneous inheritance, meticulously gifted by a race of powerful, sophisticated beings. Consider the meticulous accounting of time found in the famed Sumerian king list. Before the Great Deluge, the cataclysmic reset recognized across global myths, these tablets name 8 to 10 kings who ruled in cities like Eridu, Bad Tabira, and Larak. But it is not their governance that is strange. It is the duration of their reigns. We read of rulers holding sway for spans that beggar belief, tens of thousands of years. We are confronted with numbers like 28,800 years for one, 36,000 for another. These are not lifetimes, they are epochs. If these records are literal history, as the Sumerians clearly intended them to be, then the entire structure of human biological and historical time instantly collapses. This immense chronological depth is the first major shockwave emanating from the clay. It forces us to ask, were these figures historical leaders of humankind? Or were they members of a species whose biological lifespan, or perhaps whose cycles of governance, operated on a vastly different scale than our own fragile 70. This estrangement deepens as the tablets shift from simply documenting immense time to identifying the source of that time. The central figures in these cosmological texts are the Anunnaki. This is not a vague pantheon. The name itself is a profound descriptive label. In Sumerian, it translates roughly as those who from heaven to earth came. This suggests a literal descent, a physical relocation from an extraterrestrial origin point to the marshy plains of the Fertile Crescent. The texts describe their arrival, their initial difficulties establishing footholds, and their central mission, a mission that was not primarily spiritual or philosophical, but fundamentally practical and industrial. We begin to recognize that the Sumerian concept of the divine was intrinsically linked to technology, astronomy, and resource management. This requires us to engage with the material not as passive observers, but as active participants in deciphering a complex truth. It demands attention, reflection, and perhaps most importantly, dialogue. If these concepts resonate, if they shift the established foundations of your understanding, I encourage you to pause, internalize the weight of these ancient narratives, and share your initial reflections below. Help us build this collective recognition of the forgotten heritage. Your engagement, a quiet like, a mindful subscription, is the signal that this journey into the deep past matters. The uncomfortable truth revealed by the Anunnaki narratives is the imperative of gold. Why would highly advanced sky-traveling beings be concerned with a heavy yellow metal prized primarily on Earth for its aesthetic and conductive properties? The cuneiform accounts suggest an atmospheric crisis on their home world, a planet potentially named Nibiru, and the desperate need for pulverized gold dust to serve as a protective shield, reflecting dangerous radiation. This motive is what shifts the narrative from awe-inspiring mythology to disquieting colonial history. The Anunnaki were not visiting priests, they were sophisticated miners, project managers facing an existential environmental crisis back home. But who would perform the laborious, dangerous excavation and processing of the raw material? Here we arrive at the central, most profound, and most disquieting revelation about human origins. The tablets meticulously detail an initial period where the junior Anunnaki themselves performed the backbreaking labor. The Akkadian text, known as the Atrahasis epic, chronicles their dissatisfaction, their eventual revolt, and the crisis of labor that necessitated a solution. The solution was the engineering of a primitive worker, the Lulu or Lulu Amelu. The texts do not describe creation from nothingness, but rather a modification, a calculated acceleration of existing hominid biology. This was the moment of blending, taking the essence of a pre-existing earthly creature, the clay, and infusing it with the essence of the sky gods. Genetic manipulation, described in archaic terminology, overseen by the chief medical scientist, Ninmah, or Ninhursag, and the brilliant strategist, Enki. The recognition of this engineered origin fuels an intense unease. We are led to consider the possibility that humanity, Homo sapiens, was not the culmination of a slow, unbroken line of natural selection, but rather a hybrid species, purpose-built and accelerated to fulfill a specific industrial mandate. This explains the breathtaking speed of Sumerian civilization's emergence. Within a blink of geological time, they possessed sophisticated irrigation, astronomy, complex mathematics, the sexagesimal system, extensive legal codes, and, critically, a written language advanced enough to record the very story of their creation. This suggests inheritance, not slow invention. It implies that the blueprints for society were handed down, ready-made, by the very architects who designed the laborers. But the relationship was not meant to be perpetual. The original mission was finite, tied to the necessity of their home world. This brings us to the concept of the cycles. The Anunnaki are repeatedly linked in Sumerian texts to the great astronomical cycles, specifically the orbital period of their alleged home planet, an immensely long journey requiring thousands of terrestrial years. Their arrival and departure were not random events. They were predictable returns tied to the mechanics of the solar system. This idea of cyclical visitation suggests that the initial experiment was inherently unstable and subject to review or resumption. We are left with the chilling thought that the Anunnaki may simply be observers now, waiting for the correct celestial alignment, the optimal moment for their return. The echoes of these cycles are built into our very deepest institutions, reflected in the astronomical focus of ancient architecture and the pervasive anticipation of a signal, a return of the great sky watchers. If this knowledge was so fundamental, so clearly etched into the foundation of the world's first major civilization, why did it sink into the realm of myth and controversy? Why the echo of forgetfulness? Perhaps, as the Anunnaki eventually withdrew after the Great Flood, leaving behind descendants and agents, the semi-divine rulers who followed, the sheer burden of maintaining a history that placed humanity in a subservient, engineered role became too great. As time passed, the industrial gods were spiritually elevated, their motives sanitized, their technology replaced by magic, and their physical descents transformed into metaphorical revelations. The truth was not destroyed. It was simply buried under layers of theology, obscured by a collective need to believe in independent self-creation. The great libraries of clay became forgotten archives, holding not poetry or legend, but deposition transcripts of an unprecedented encounter. We are forced to confront the idea that the essential components of our existence, our capacity for genius, our innate violence, and our seemingly unnatural dissatisfaction with the pace of life, might be the residual programming of a species engineered for servitude and accelerated beyond its natural capacity. The current state of humanity feels less like a finished product and more like an unfinished experiment, a project left simmering on the back burner of the cosmos. The tablets offer the final, most haunting implication. If our origins were engineered for a specific external purpose, then that purpose may still hold sway, waiting for the return of the original architects. The evidence is voluminous, consistent, and waiting for those willing to brave the discomfort of recognition. If you have navigated the deep currents of this history and felt the weight of these ancient revelations, you are recognizing a pattern that traditional archaeology has long neglected. This journey is one of immense intellectual courage, and your commitment to understanding this material signals your place in the circle of those who seek the deepest truths. If you've stayed with us through this discussion of the Golden Imperative and the origin of the worker species, please take a moment now to ensure you are subscribed and that you like this video. It is the only way this quiet investigation can continue to bring these critical pieces of the past to light. And as a profound marker of your involvement in this specific stage of discovery, please comment the exact phrase, "I recognize the cycle." This small action connects you directly to the central, enduring mystery of the Anunnaki's relationship with Earth. We have only just established the framework of their arrival and the creation of humanity. The next part will delve into the complexities of their internal hierarchy, the rivalry between Enki and Enlil, and the resulting chaos that shaped our early civilization and determined our future. Remain vigilant, for the past is always just ahead of us. Click on the next segment now as we move closer to understanding the Great Cataclysm. Is it possible that our beginning was not a slow, agonizing crawl from the primordial mud, but rather a sharp, almost instantaneous insertion? We have spent centuries defining ourselves by the gradual ascent, measuring progress in slow increments of flint and fire. Yet when we look back at the historical record, specifically to the marshlands of Mesopotamia, the timeline refuses to cooperate with our neat models. The transition is not gradual, it is a violent, inexplicable jump. The Sumerian civilization, the very first organized society we can definitively catalog, seems to emerge not from adolescence, but fully formed, bearing the sophisticated scars of a vast, forgotten antiquity. This quiet disruption is the most unsettling aspect of the ancient record. Where are the 1,000 years of developmental steps that should precede the complex legal codes, the advanced irrigation, the perfect cuneiform script, and the staggering astronomical understanding? We find none. We only find the finished architecture of a complex state, complete with a priesthood, a bureaucratic structure, and a cosmological narrative so dense and cohesive that it seems to have been downloaded wholesale. It is this sudden, shocking competence that forces the serious investigator to move beyond the anthropological comfort zone and into the realm of the profoundly strange. The tablets themselves bear witness not just to their daily lives, but to an era preceding even their own historical memory, an epoch defined by what the Sumerians called the ephemeral kingship. These Sumerian king lists, unearthed masterpieces of chronological accounting, present a profound challenge to modern dating methods. They meticulously record rulers who reigned before the Great Deluge, men, or perhaps not merely men, who governed for periods that defy all biological and historical logic, tens of thousands of years for a single ruler. Alulim, Alalgar, and Menluana. Their names echo across the clay, each one anchoring a segment of time so vast it swallows entire modern historical eras. To dismiss this simply as mythological exaggeration is a premature intellectual retreat. If these scribes were capable of meticulously recording agricultural yields, standardized weights, and complex trade routes, the very foundation of their functioning society, why would they suddenly abandon all semblance of measured reality when describing their deepest past? The consistency of these impossible reigns, stretching back to a time when kingship descended from heaven, suggests they were recording a reality profoundly different from our own, perhaps measured by a different clock or experienced by beings operating under vastly different physiological constraints. This introduces the initial discomfort, the realization that the ancient authors were absolutely convinced of the accuracy of these impossible statistics, suggesting a true recognition of a vast cycle of time that dwarfs human perception. If we pause for a moment and allow ourselves to truly absorb the weight of this information, the sheer persistence of this narrative of extreme longevity, we realize that we are standing at a critical juncture. It is necessary to consider the possibility that these texts are not simple myths, but rather highly stylized historical accounts filtered through the trauma of the flood and subsequent cultural rebuilding. If you find this proposition, that the earliest record of civilization suggests non-human longevity was once present on Earth, worthy of deep reflection, then I invite you to participate in this discovery process. Pause right now and consider this question. What singular word best describes your feeling when confronting the scale of the Sumerian pre-deluge timelines? Share that word in the comments below, letting your curiosity guide this investigation. This deeper understanding, This sharing of the cognitive load is precisely how we move closer to the truth, together. And if you feel the weight of this ancient history pulling you forward, ensure you are subscribed to this channel, so you do not miss the ongoing unfolding of this deep investigation into our inherited past. This recognition of advanced antiquity extends far beyond mere chronological exaggeration. The Sumerians possessed an astronomical knowledge that should have been impossible for a culture that supposedly hadn't yet invented the telescope. Their detailed records of the precession of the equinoxes, a measurement requiring centuries of accumulated observation, is baffling. Even more intriguing is their precise mapping of the outer planets, including Uranus, Neptune, and the dwarf planet Pluto, all invisible to the naked eye. How could they know? The answer, according to the tablets, is explicit. This knowledge was not discovered, but imparted. It was part of the heritage of the Anunnaki, those who came down from heaven, and whose very existence was tied to a cyclical celestial body, Nibiru, whose orbit defined the great sweeping ages of their presence and absence. The Sumerian understanding of the cosmos was a direct blueprint, a celestial map handed down, not earned through terrestrial effort. This was the crafting of fate itself, knowledge given by those who understood the mechanics of the solar system as intimately as a modern engineer understands the inner workings of a clock. Moreover, the material culture described in the texts suggests a mastery of elements far beyond bronze or copper. We read descriptions of advanced metallurgy and alloys, of materials capable of withstanding extreme conditions, materials necessary for traversing vast distances. The tablets detail operations for refining gold, not merely for adornment or currency, but for a highly specific technological purpose. Gold, the texts suggest, was the focus of the Anunnaki's endeavors on Earth. It was their primary resource. They weren't seeking simple trade. They were engaged in industrial mining on a scale we struggle to reconcile with the archaeological record, suggesting that the true remnants of this operation might be buried deep beneath the sands or washed clean by the global catastrophe they documented. This raises a critical and unsettling question. If advanced beings needed a specific resource, particularly gold, what was its intended function in their technology or their atmospheric remediation efforts? Was Earth simply a fueling station, or was it something more profound, a laboratory? The geographical settings described often center on the Eden, frequently translated as the abode of the righteous ones, a place often paralleled with the later biblical garden. Yet, in the Sumerian context, the Eden was less a pastoral paradise and more an operational base, a place of significant constraints and controlled access. This was the location where the Igigi, the lower tier of Anunnaki workers, eventually rebelled against the exhausting labor demands. This unrest, detailed in the Atrahasis epic, is the crucial hinge upon which the entire narrative turns, transitioning from the divine era to the human era. The gods were weary. They refused to continue the grinding physical work required to sustain their operations. The solution was drastic, ingenious, and profoundly disturbing: the creation of a replacement workforce. This brings us directly to the primal dust and the divine blueprint. The goddess Ninti, later known as Ninhursag, the mistress of life, assisted by Enki, the god of wisdom and water, undertook the genetic experiment. The Sumerian accounts describe the taking of a local hominid, the Adamu, and mixing its essence with the Sha, or life essence, of a slain god. This was not spontaneous evolution. It was genetic engineering driven by industrial necessity. The texts are explicit about the process: the mixing of clay, the local earth material or cellular matrix, with the blood of a god, carrying the specific Anunnaki genetic code. The resulting creature, Lulu Amalu, the primitive worker, was imbued with the capacity for intelligence, language, and, critically, the ability to labor. This was the burden of imitation. Humanity was created to bear the physical yoke of the gods, to perform the tasks that were too mundane or too taxing for the divine architects themselves. Our creation, therefore, was not an act of unconditional love or spontaneous generation, but a calculated life-saving measure for the exhausted Anunnaki. The resulting history suggests that this act of creation was immediately followed by a period of intentional management, perhaps even suppression. Were the architects of the sleep those who, after the deluge and the subsequent reset, ensured that the newly elevated humans would forget the true technological nature of their origins? The memory of the Anunnaki and Nibiru, the planetary cycle that brings them into periodic proximity with Earth, became codified into myth, fading into the background of ceremonial reverence. But the cyclical pattern remains a persistent, haunting echo in the Sumerian narratives. They speak not just of their arrival, but of their eventual inevitable return. The Anunnaki departed, but they did not vanish. They simply retreated into the long shadows of their great astronomical cycle, waiting for the celestial signal that would herald the time for re-engagement. We are left to grapple with this immense inheritance, a civilization built upon a foundation of borrowed knowledge, implanted by temporary visitors for a specific, self-serving purpose. How much of our deepest subconscious fears and aspirations are merely echoes of this engineered beginning? The ongoing investigation requires us to hold these paradoxes in tension. The existence of immense temporal scales in the king lists, the impossible astronomical data, and the startlingly clear genetic engineering narrative. We must continuously question the gaps in our own scientific understanding, the missing links in the evolutionary chain, the sudden appearance of modern Homo sapiens. Do these gaps truly represent failures in the terrestrial record, or are they the precise points where the non-terrestrial influence was most pronounced? This is where the layers of mystery deepen, forcing us to consider that our current age might simply be one brief flicker in the long, dark intermission between the cycles of their presence. If you have followed this exploration, recognizing the profound implications of these ancient tablets and the calculated necessity behind the Anunnaki's actions, then you belong to the few who dare to gaze into the true abyss of prehistory. We are merely uncovering the blueprints left behind, the faint signal of a distant world that shaped our own. If this deep dive into the primal dust and the burden of imitation resonates with the questions you carry about human existence, I urge you to become a recognized part of this investigation. Please subscribe now and click the like button to ensure this signal reaches more fellow observers. And to mark your presence here, comment with the exact phrase, "The burden of imitation." This simple action anchors your commitment to understanding our true origins. As the shadows lengthen and the Sumerian echoes grow louder, we must prepare to examine the profound consequences of the Great Flood and how that catastrophe redefined humanity's relationship with its creators. An examination we undertake in the next part of this continuous journey, where the tablets reveal the desperate, final attempts of the Anunnaki to manage their volatile experiment. Do not look away. The story has only just begun to reveal its true contours. We have already navigated the sheer audacity of the cuneiform accounts, detailing beings who descended from the heavens, establishing operational bases, and demanding resources. But if these beings, the Anunnaki, possess the technology, the organization, and the overwhelming dominance described, why did their direct, palpable presence eventually fade into myth? This is where the historical record, even the fragmented legacy left in the clay tablets, shifts from documentation to prophecy, from history to a waiting game. There is a deep, persistent echo in the archaeological silence that follows the peak of Sumerian glory. It's the sound of something incredibly powerful having simply stepped back, not vanished. This lingering feeling that the architects of the first great civilization merely moved their headquarters off-planet, or perhaps simply changed their level of interaction, is perhaps the most unnerving realization drawn from a deep study of these texts. We are left looking at the magnificent ruins of Uruk and Ur, not as relics of a fallen empire, but perhaps as remnants of a project that was temporarily paused. What happens when the engineers leave the construction site, but the blueprints are still scattered on the ground? The tablets speak of meticulously planned schedules, of cyclical returns, and of tasks completed, or, critically, tasks left pending. The early chapters of human history, as recounted by Sumer, are not merely tales of gods and men. They are organizational reports. They detail the need for a labor force, the successful genetic intervention creating the Lulu Amelu, and the establishment of rules intended to maintain order during the long periods when the great ones were elsewhere. When we observe the staggering discontinuity between the hunter-gatherer existence and the instantaneous complexity of Sumer, with its legal codes, astronomy, irrigation systems, and standardized language, it feels less like evolution and more like initialization. It's too fast, too perfect, too complete. This realization brings with it the strange, cold shock of recognizing one's own origins, not as a spontaneous blossoming, but as a carefully orchestrated event, perhaps even a necessary side effect of a larger celestial industrial need. This awareness forces us to re-examine our collective amnesia. Why do subsequent civilizations only remember these beings as mythological shadows, as distant Olympians or Titans, stripped of their tangible engineering prowess? Was the forgetting intentional, a necessary part of allowing the experiment, the human race, to run its course without constant direct supervision? The records suggest the Anunnaki utilized specific astronomical cycles, vast periods of time incomprehensible to human lifespan, to govern their coming and going. For them, 1,000 human years might be a single rotation of the guard. This perception of time, this grand scale of cosmic engagement, is vital to understanding the Anunnaki narrative. If we are to truly grasp what the Sumerian tablets reveal about our origins, we must first accept that we may be living in the middle of a chapter, not at the end of the story. The subtle signs are still there, encoded in the ancient measurements, in the precision of the ziggurats aligned to celestial points that only become significant during certain astronomical windows. We are merely following the echoes of the grand initial impulse. We must pause here, standing on the threshold of this immense chronological void, and ask ourselves, if the evidence of intentional design is so compelling, what are the implications for our contemporary understanding of self and sovereignty? This journey requires patience, an openness to rearrange the foundational pillars of accepted history. If these concepts resonate, if the quiet, powerful implications of this narrative compel you to look deeper into the shadows of the past, then I invite you to share your deepest thoughts and insights below. Use a single word to describe how you feel facing this potential discontinuity. And if this exploration is valuable, if it helps illuminate the complex tapestry of our origins, consider supporting this channel's mission to peel back these layers of time. The true revelation is always found in the focused continuation of the search. The Sumerian texts, particularly those detailing the movements of the celestial body known as Nibiru, the supposed homeworld of the Anunnaki, do not describe a random visitation, but a calculated, repetitive orbit. This cycle, often estimated in the thousands of years, provides the essential framework for the Great Forgetting. Our civilizations rise and fall within the span of one such cosmic rotation. To the Anunnaki, returning after millennia would be like a contractor revisiting a site after a long vacation. They would expect to see progress, perhaps even some regrettable wear and tear, but they would still recognize the fundamental structure they engineered. It is our perception of time that generates the myth. For them, it is merely logistics. This discrepancy in chronological scale explains the estrangement we feel when reading the tablets. They speak of concerns that seem strangely mundane yet cosmically important. The necessity of gold for atmospheric repair on Nibiru. This specific industrial purpose is the key that unlocks the narrative of the Lulu Amalu. We were not created for worship initially, but for labor. The genetic modification of the primitive hominid, the spark of intelligence gifted by Enki and Ninhursag, was a shortcut, a solution to a difficult mining operation that the Anunnaki found beneath their dignity to perform themselves. The tablets are brutally frank about the functional, necessary, and temporary nature of this arrangement. They confirm that our existence was fundamentally transactional, a means to an end tied to the survival of a distant, highly advanced civilization. The vast deserts of Mesopotamia were, in this light, simply a vast, open-pit mine, and humanity, the newly minted tool. But the Anunnaki were not merely cold industrialists. Their extreme longevity, stretching across these vast cosmic cycles, presented its own unique burden of immortality. Imagine experiencing human history, the rise of empires, the invention of philosophy, the discovery of science, in the time it takes for a single asteroid to complete its orbit. Human time is ephemeral, intense, volatile. For the Anunnaki, watching their creation develop must have been a peculiar blend of pride, annoyance, and profound distance. This is the source of the inquiétation, the understanding that the gods who created us are fundamentally different, governed by concerns of existence far beyond the terrestrial. Their internal conflicts, documented extensively in the epic poems, often revolve around how much knowledge, how much freedom, How much seed of civilization should be intentionally accelerated into the newly formed human race? There was profound disagreement among their leaders, Enlil insisting on strict control and separation, Enki arguing for mentorship and education, a dispute that echoes through every major flood myth and divine intervention story. The struggle over humanity's future was a geopolitical dispute among the stars. We see this intentional acceleration in the detailed knowledge of astronomy suddenly available to the Sumerians. It was not developed empirically over centuries. It seems to have been downloaded. The precision of their calendar and their knowledge of planetary mechanics imply a mentorship that transcends natural human discovery. This was the Anunnaki's legacy, the silent witness left behind. The blueprints for civilization were embedded not just in clay, but in the social structure and the inherent curiosity of the human mind. They provided the tools and then stepped back to observe the experiment run its course, monitoring development from afar. The tablets often mention observers stationed on Earth long after the main contingent departed, maintaining the illusion of constant divine presence while collecting data on humanity's burgeoning self-governance. The critical point, which transitions us toward a deeper understanding of the revelation gradual, is the concept of the return protocol. The Sumerian texts, and echoed later in various ancient mythologies, carry an almost palpable expectation of their creator's eventual re-emergence. They left signs, not as farewells, but as markers for their return voyage. The ziggurats themselves, massive structures oriented towards specific celestial alignments, function potentially as beacons or navigational aids, maintained by successive generations of priests who, perhaps, understood more about the cosmic clock than we give them credit for. The Anunnaki are not merely figures of history, they are figures of an impending future. This expectation of the gods' inevitable return permeates the collective unconscious of subsequent cultures, manifesting in apocalyptic prophecies or messianic hopes. It's the lingering fear that the custodians are coming back to check on the condition of their inherited property. If we are indeed an experiment running on a timeline dictated by celestial mechanics, what does that imply about the permanence of our earthly power structures? From the divine, long-lived perspective of the Anunnaki, the conflicts, the empires, the ideological wars that consume human history must appear transient, almost instantaneous, like the flashing neon signs of a temporary marketplace. Their interest lies not in our politics, but in our output, our genetic stability, and perhaps the continued availability of the necessary resource. They are the ultimate long-term observers, and their return, whenever it aligns with the great cycles of Nibiru, signals a massive recalibration. This perspective explains why the Sumerian king lists detailed periods of rule lasting tens of thousands of years. Those were the reigns of the Anunnaki themselves, ruling directly before they handed authority to human proxies, creating a hereditary system of divine kingship designed to maintain their terrestrial infrastructure during their periodic absence. This brings us to the most unsettling question derived from the detailed study of their records. Was the experiment considered finished when they departed? Or are we, in our current complex and volatile state, merely the advanced iteration of the unfinished experiment, awaiting the final review? The clay tablets offer us fragments of this terrifying cosmic continuity, suggesting that the terms of the initial contract, the creation of the laborer, might still be in effect, regardless of whether we remember signing it. The full scope of this potential continued obligation must be examined as we proceed. The deeper we dig into the ancient texts, the clearer it becomes that the end of the Anunnaki's physical presence did not mean the end of their plan. It meant the beginning of the next phase: observation and passive waiting. We have peered into the astronomical heart of the Anunnaki narrative, realizing that their absence is governed by a cosmic clock far beyond our immediate grasp. The sheer scale of this ancient operation challenges everything we assume about the linear progression of human history. If you have journeyed this deep into the shadows of Sumer, recognizing the powerful implications of an orchestrated genesis and the looming threat of the return protocol, then you are part of a select few willing to confront the profound truth hidden in the silence of the epics. If this sustained investigation into the nature of the tablets and the origin of our species holds meaning for you, ensure you are subscribed to the channel. Liking this video helps these crucial explorations reach others who are ready to question the established narrative. Finally, to mark your presence at this critical juncture, please comment below with the specific phrase, "The cycle continues." This helps track our deepest explorers. The next part of our investigation must delve into the very structure of the Anunnaki hierarchy and the deep personal conflicts that shape their decisions regarding humanity, forcing us to ask, were they truly gods or merely powerful progenitors fighting amongst themselves? The answers lie ahead. Join us then as the revelation continues to unfold. Is it possible that the deepest truths about our origins are not buried beneath layers of soil, but rather masked by the very sophistication of their presentation? We have marveled at the sudden appearance of Sumer, a civilization that burst onto the stage of history fully formed, equipped with writing, astronomy, complex legal systems, and meticulous knowledge of orbital mechanics far exceeding what should have been possible for a culture emerging from the Neolithic dust. But when we look closer at the sheer density of the cuneiform record, a sense of profound unease begins to settle in. It is not the content itself that initially provokes this unsettling feeling, but the context. The implication that this entire structure of governance, religion, and scientific understanding was not the result of slow, generational development, but rather a calculated, immediate implementation. A download of consciousness, a complete operating system installed onto a population seemingly prepared for the task. The tablets reveal an obsession with precision, not only in measuring the seasons, but in tracking immensely long periods, cosmic cycles that stretch beyond the scope of human lifespan or even dynastic memory. This focus on the vast timescale of 3,600 years, known as the Shar, feels disproportionate unless the observers themselves were living on that scale, or unless they were anxiously awaiting an event tied to that grand orbital marker. We begin to understand the Sumerian perception of history less as a linear progression toward progress, and more as a series of crucial, repeating cycles, punctuated by the expected arrival and departure of the great celestial travelers, the Anunnaki. This realization forces a difficult question. If their knowledge was so complete at the outset, what happened to it? Why do subsequent human civilizations, Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, appear to be struggling to relearn fragments of the very knowledge that the Sumerians seemingly inherited whole? This pattern suggests not just a decline, but perhaps a great recurring amnesia, an intentional or perhaps necessary forgetting that follows the departure of the guiding presence. We are left sifting through the echoes of failed cycles, wondering if the human experiment, as chronicled on these clay tablets, was merely the latest iteration in a sequence of attempts, each one ultimately curtailed by cosmic timing or perhaps internal conflict among the non-terrestrial overseers. The narrative, dense and complex, repeatedly introduces themes of necessary labor, of resources running low, and of a great environmental upheaval that precedes the establishment of human servitude. It is a story framed by pragmatism and survival, not merely divine whimsy. If you are sensing the weight of this implication, that our history is not solely ours, but tied irrevocably to the practical needs of beings whose existence spans millennia, then you are truly beginning to read between the lines of the cuneiform. This journey requires reflection, a willingness to question the foundational myths of linear time and solitary human achievement. If you find this contemplation resonates deep within your understanding of the past, take a moment to engage with the record we are exploring. Liking this transmission helps signal its importance, and subscribing ensures you remain connected to this slow, deliberate unfolding of the record. Tell us in the comments which Sumerian detail, the precision, the cycles, or the suddenness of civilization, feels the most out of place to you. Your insights, like the careful study of a broken fragment of clay, help us piece together this colossal narrative of human origins. This brings us directly to the concept of the observational tower, not necessarily a physical structure of brick and mortar, but the metaphorical structure of supervision embedded within the earliest texts. The Anunnaki were not merely creators, they were managers of a complex, resource-intensive operation. The tablets, particularly those dealing with administration and labor organization, detail quotas, distribution of rations, and strict disciplinary measures. These are the records of a functioning colony, not a Garden of Eden. We must recognize that the most jarring aspect of the Sumerian narrative is the acknowledgement that human utility was immediately linked to the arduous, dangerous task of mining and processing vital materials, particularly gold, a substance described as essential not for trade or jewelry here on Earth, but for the preservation of the atmosphere on the Anunnaki's home planet, Nibiru. This interpretation transforms the creation myth from an act of loving divinity into a necessary genetic engineering project designed to procure a reliable workforce capable of withstanding the harsh conditions and the high-demand workload. It was the interruption of lineage, the surgical introduction of a modified genome, blending the essence of the Earth's native hominids with the more advanced traits of the visitors. The resulting species, the Adamu, carried the weight of the task within their very DNA. They were engineered for service, designed to perform the heavy lifting that the high-ranking Anunnaki had grown weary of, and which the subordinate Igigi had rebelled against. The tablets lay bare the tension inherent in this arrangement. The gods are frequently depicted as conflicted, often frustrated by the limitations of their creations, yet dependent upon them. This creates a profound historical dissonance. The very beings we are taught to worship are documented in their own records as relying on the species they created for their own survival. The legacy imprinted in clay, therefore, is not merely a genealogy of divine beings, but a meticulous corporate record of resource management and bioengineering. We see this tension repeated in the narrative surrounding the Great Flood, where the decision to allow humanity to perish is framed within the context of a disastrous failure of the colonial project, followed by the rapid, almost reluctant rescue of Ziusudra, the Sumerian Noah, driven by the intervention of one specific Anunnaki, Enki. Why the shift? Why rescue the very experiment they had decided to abandon? The key lies perhaps in the immediate post-diluvial narrative, where the tablets detail the urgent need to restart agriculture and, crucially, to re-establish the labor pool. The human element, flawed though it was, had become indispensable. The Sumerian tablets thus serve as an indelible testament to our initial role, essential workers in a cosmic enterprise, holders of an imposed hereditary burden. As we probe the sheer volume of tablets, seeking clarity, we inevitably confront the search for the missing record, the deliberate lacunae, the periods of history where information suddenly dries up, or where conflicting accounts are presented side by side, suggesting a censorship applied perhaps by later human priests or even by the non-terrestrial overseers themselves before their departure. What vital information was redacted? Was it the precise location of the spaceports, the full chemical formula for the atmospheric protection, or perhaps the mechanism by which the Anunnaki intended to control the resulting human population after the gold extraction project concluded? The lack of these records fuels the current disquiet, compelling us to recognize that the history we have inherited is incomplete, possibly by design. The progression of the narrative continually leads us back to the astronomical calculations, underscoring the deep-seated cultural anxiety surrounding the recurring sign of the approaching orbit. The Sumerians structured their entire societal existence around the expectation of the return. Their temples, their ziggurats, their ritual calendars, all were oriented toward the celestial sphere, not merely in abstract reverence, but in practical preparation for the moment Nibiru would swing back into proximity. This expectation implies a cycle of intervention. They arrive, they fix their planet, they extract the necessary resources, they manage the workers, and then they leave, promising a return upon the next cycle. This unspoken promise of the gods is the motor driving Sumerian civilization, and arguably the subconscious anxiety woven into all subsequent human history. The tablets do not conclude this story. They merely document the middle chapters, leaving us hanging in the interim period, the long wait between the great orbital markers. If you have stayed with this detailed and often challenging exploration, if you have felt the profound recognition of something ancient stirring beneath the surface of modern history, then you are a true participant in this investigation. This journey into the deepest archives of our planetary existence requires commitment. To ensure you receive the next crucial part of this series, where we delve into the physical evidence connecting the tablets to modern archaeological findings, please consider subscribing now. Give this video a like to help spread the word about this essential research. And finally, let us solidify this stage of our journey by commenting below with the specific phrase, the echo of Ziusudra, a symbol of the human legacy that refuses to be extinguished. The tablets offer us an invitation to witness the truth, but they also demand our full attention. Stay with us as we move into the next phase of discovery, and prepare yourself for what the continuation of this extraordinary documentation reveals about our future, which, according to the Sumerian texts, remains inexorably linked to the return. What if the most profound understanding of our own existence is not buried in the distant future, awaiting some technological leap, but is instead etched into the fragile clay of a long-forgotten past, waiting only for us to truly read it? We have explored the initial shock of the Sumerian accounts, the arrival of the Sky People, the Anunnaki, and the desperate need for gold that catalyzed the most audacious genetic experiment imaginable. But to stop there is to miss the far more unsettling truth that these tablets hint at, a truth that stretches beyond simple creation and speaks to the very architecture of our consciousness and the deliberate limitations placed upon it. If the Lulu Amelu, the mixed worker, was engineered to be robust enough for labor, yet subservient enough for control, then the ongoing question is this: what residual design flaws, or perhaps residual intended features, did the original engineering leave imprinted upon our species? The ancient scribes, in their detailed chronicles, speak of a refinement process, a series of upgrades that moved the primitive hominid, the raw material, closer to the image of the divine architects themselves. Yet this closeness was always tempered by an inescapable distance. We were given intelligence, yes, the capacity for sophisticated language and abstract thought certainly, but this gift came tethered to a dramatically truncated lifespan. The texts repeatedly imply that the Anunnaki lived for epochs, their passing marked not by decades, but by the sweep of astronomical ages, while the laborers they designed were meant to burn bright and quickly, serving their purpose within a manageable temporal window. This disparity, the cruel joke of granting near-divine intellectual capacity encased in highly fragile, fleeting biology, is perhaps the first great enigma of our documented origins. It suggests that the modification was not merely about capability, but fundamentally about control through planned obsolescence. It casts a long, strange shadow over our inherent human yearning for immortality and transcendence, a yearning that might be nothing more than a residual memory, an echo of the lifespan we were meant to have before the engineering was finalized. As we turn the brittle pages of this reconstructed history, the focus shifts from the creation event itself to the subsequent stewardship, or lack thereof, exercised by our celestial progenitors. The tablets are deeply ambiguous regarding the unanimity of the Anunnaki Council. Not all observers agreed with the stringent separation enforced between master and servant. This brings us to the unsettling persistence of memory, the whispers of the Igigi, sometimes called the Watchers, a secondary group of celestial beings who were perhaps closer to Earth for longer periods. They are the figures who, according to various non-Sumerian but parallel texts, broke ranks. They looked upon the engineered species, the newly refined humans, and saw something beyond mere tools. They recognized a potential, a nascent intelligence struggling against its biological and intellectual constraints. They dared to share forbidden knowledge, the secrets of agriculture beyond basic needs, the complex calculations of celestial mechanics, the forging of metals, and perhaps most critically, a deeper understanding of the nature of the Anunnaki themselves. This act of intellectual insurrection fractured the divine hierarchy, initiating a cosmic drama that permeates every subsequent myth of fallen angels and punished prophets. This rebellion of the Watchers serves as the catalyst for the profound strangeness that followed. If humanity received unsanctioned knowledge, skills beyond the intended labor capacity, it meant the experiment had gone rogue. The Anunnaki had intended for quiet, efficient servitude, but they had accidentally instilled a spark of restless, independent inquiry. This transgression, according to the tablets, necessitated intervention, a major course correction. And here we touch upon the great cyclical rhythm that governs this entire narrative, the astronomical mechanism that dictated the Anunnaki's long absences and planned returns. The texts speak less of random visitation and more of a predictable schedule tied to the orbital period of their home world, Nibiru. This cycle, immense in scope, meant that their stay on Earth was always temporary, a window of opportunity followed by vast, silent eras of retreat. The recognition of this cycle is where true intellectual unease begins. It implies that the great cataclysms and global reorganizations that have periodically wiped the slate clean of nascent civilizations might not be merely natural disasters, but events linked, either directly or indirectly, to the movement of their colossal wandering planet, or perhaps intentional interventions designed to manage the runaway experiment before their scheduled departure. Were the great floods and epics of global ruin a method of cleanup, a reset button pressed before the long journey home? If so, the Anunnaki weren't just architects. They were the silent, indifferent demolishers, the ones who allowed advanced human settlements to flourish under supervision, only to have the supporting structure pulled away when their orbital window closed. The ruins of great, impossible structures, megalithic sites demonstrating precise calculations that defy the supposed capabilities of their era, stand as silent monuments to these periods of rapid cultural ascent and equally rapid, inexplicable oblivion. These are not relics of slow evolution. They are fragments of forgotten toolkits. We are left sifting through the remains, struggling to distinguish between the knowledge officially granted and the knowledge secretly imparted. Think of the sudden, baffling sophistication of early Sumerian civilization. The wheel, written language, complex legal systems, sophisticated irrigation, all seemingly emerging from a vacuum. Was this genius truly organic, or was it the residual blueprint left by engineers who simply packed up the more crucial tools and left the basic manuals lying around? The enigma of the lost tools, the disappearance of technologies capable of achieving feats we still struggle to replicate today, suggests a calculated abandonment. They did not simply leave. They deliberately obscured the methods of their construction, ensuring that the next cycle of civilization would begin again from a baseline of manageable ignorance. And yet, the psychological imprint remains. If you feel compelled to acknowledge a higher power, to offer devotion, to structure your society around a strict hierarchy overseen by invisible forces, is that spiritual imperative? Or is it a behavioral echo of the original master-servant dynamic encoded into the very foundation of the first civilized consciousness? We continue to search the skies, often unconsciously, for the return of the patrons, the guides, the ones who promised order and delivery from chaos. This is not just belief. It is, according to the Sumerian narrative, a historical fact woven into the fabric of our memory. This relentless internal drive for guidance, this feeling that something essential is missing from our current state of being, could be the most profound and persistent signal of our manufactured origin. The intensity of this inquiry, the dedication required to sift through the mythological camouflage and the academic skepticism, demands a certain focused attention. If these fragments of clay truly hold the key to who we are, then ignoring the patterns and parallels they present is to willingly remain confined within a historical narrative that is far too small for our reality. It requires a willingness to engage, not just to listen. So pause for a moment to internalize these concepts: the engineered lifespan, the cycle of return, the memory of forgotten tools. If these ideas resonate with that deep, quiet sense that something fundamental is still concealed, that we are peering through a veil, then let that reflection be shared. To join this conversation, to contribute to the collective effort of piecing together this vast cosmic puzzle is essential. Take a moment now to reflect on this idea of planned obsolescence and the desire for immortality. Perhaps tell us what phrase or concept has resonated most powerfully with you in the comments below. Your focused attention fuels this detailed exploration. If the depth of this investigation into our origins is meaningful to you, ensure you are subscribed and that you have signaled your interest with a like, confirming that this kind of sustained, deep inquiry is valued. As we stand at this precipice of recognition, having acknowledged the deliberate limitations and the cosmic schedule, we must now address the immediate future described in these same tablets. For if the cycle is real, and the Anunnaki's orbit dictates their presence, then the records must also contain warnings, signals, and predictions regarding the impending conclusion of the current era. They spoke of signs left behind, coded markers in the earth and in the heavens, intended to be understood when the orbital alignment once again brought the great traveler close. What if the massive geopolitical and environmental upheavals of our own time are not random noise, but highly complex, yet discernible signals? What if the increasing clarity of our own scientific understanding, the ability to map the cosmos, to decode the genome, is the ultimate sign that the engineered limits are finally being overcome, signaling the potential readiness for a long-awaited reunion, or perhaps a confrontation. The gradual revelation embedded within the next set of narrative arcs must therefore shift from the historical past to the immediate, compelling present. The tablets, despite their antiquity, hold discussions about the future, about the time when the gods would again prepare the landing sites, the staging areas, and re-establish the protocols for management. To truly grasp the gravity of the Sumerian inheritance, we must now turn our gaze outward, scrutinizing the very environment around us. The unexplained architectural anomalies, the persistent sightings of aerial phenomena, and the modern scientific efforts that, perhaps unwittingly, mirror the Anunnaki's original genetic goals. The next stage of this investigation demands a fearless look at the remaining physical evidence, the final undeniable remnants left by the sky people that persist even today, waiting to confirm every whisper written on the clay. The mystery deepens not in the past, but in the unfolding of our own immediate horizon. If this journey into the cyclical nature of civilization and the profound philosophical implications of the Sumerian tablets has held your attention, and if you feel that insistent pull toward the truth that lies just beneath the surface of accepted history, then you are precisely where you need to be. If you have reached this point, you understand the necessity of this sustained, deliberate inquiry. Show your commitment to this deeper investigation by making sure you are subscribed to the channel. Please leave a like on this video to signal that this dense analytical content is exactly what you seek. And for the comment this time, I ask you to internalize the most unsettling idea we discussed today, the engineered lifespan, and simply write this phrase below: the echo of the primordial experiment. This marks your recognition of the core dilemma. The evidence, the physical proof, and the discussion of modern implications await us in our next segment. Do not stray from the path. The most critical pieces of this monumental puzzle are yet to be revealed. Click to watch the next part appearing on your screen now as we move closer to the undeniable evidence. What if the most crucial data about our existence isn't stored in DNA, but in the silence between the epochs, the vast, unexplored abyss of time stretching back before written history? We have analyzed the composition of the Sumerian tablets, the logistics of the gold extraction, the shocking specifics of the genetic laboratory, the sudden and engineered arrival of Lulu Amelu, the primitive worker. But the deepest mystery does not lie in how they arrived or what they did then, but why they left and what they planned for now. We are constantly measuring time in human scale, decades, centuries, millennia. The Anunnaki, however, operated on a geological, even astronomical timescale. If their home planet, Nibiru, followed a massive elongated orbit, making close approaches perhaps every 3,600 years, then their interventions were not spontaneous events, but structured components of colossal cyclical projects. The mere fact of their departure, chronicled cryptographically within the mythos of their ruling deities, Enlil and Enki, reveals a chilling paradox. They established a proxy civilization, granted it the spark of consciousness, and then retreated to wait for the celestial clock to complete its enormous revolution. This suggests that the entire scope of human history, from the first ziggurat to the most advanced satellite, may be merely an interim report, a long supervised gestation period awaiting the next mandatory inspection. This echo of the first command, "Let us create a worker," reverberates through the millennia, now sounding less like a singular event of necessity and more like the foundational premise of an ongoing cosmic experiment. The paradox of the immortal observer is stark. To a being whose lifespan measures thousands of our years, our entire historical record, the rise and fall of empires, the birth of major religions, the explosion of technological capability, is simply a fleeting blur, a brief, high-speed phase in a much larger research program. They did not leave because the work was finished. They left because the orbital mechanics required it. The Sumerian tablets meticulously detail the initial hierarchy, the Dingir, who descended from the heavens, but they become subtly opaque precisely when dealing with the transition of power. Why construct an elaborate, self-replicating workforce capable of running the planet only to abandon them entirely? The answer is uncomfortable. They never abandoned us. They simply outsourced the maintenance. The shadow of the 3,600-year orbit, the Shar or Saru's cycle mentioned in ancient cosmological texts, hangs over every great historical transformation. If their presence was governed by this massive elliptical pathway, then every major reset button in Earth's history, the great floods, the sudden shifts in technology, the inexplicable emergence of complex urban centers, might correlate not with terrestrial events, but with cosmic timing. This recognition brings with it a deep sense of strangeness, the understanding that our primary drivers of change may not be internal evolution, but external scheduled supervision. This cyclical timing explains the establishment of terrestrial kingship, the very first political structures given divine sanction. Kingship, as described in the tablets, was a direct grant from the Anunnaki, a built-in obsolescence designed to manage their assets while they were physically absent. These initial kings were not rulers chosen by humans, but carefully selected bloodlines, genetically or structurally predisposed to communicate with and obey the protocols left behind by the departing celestial patrons. They were the caretakers, the proxies, entrusted with preserving the gold flow, maintaining order, and, crucially, defending the knowledge that they were merely secondary administrators. This systematic control mechanism paved the way for the Great Forgetting, a seemingly deliberate process of historical amnesia. When the celestial patrons departed, the immediate, undeniable reality of their physical presence faded into memory, and memory warped into myth. This warping was perhaps not accidental. It is far easier to manage an asset species that believes its overseers are distant, benevolent spirits than one that knows they are highly technological, occasionally ruthless, and very practical scientists scheduled to return. The creation of complex religious systems, substituting fear and faith for literal knowledge, became the primary tool for erasing the most inconvenient truths contained within the tablets. If these thoughts resonate, if you feel this ancient dust stirring, perhaps sharing your own insights below, tell us which part of the Anunnaki timeline feels most unsettling to you, is part of piecing the whole narrative together. It is in the collective pondering that these obscured truths gain their clearest focus. Take a moment to ensure you are subscribed to this channel and that you have pressed the like button, as this signals the deeper algorithms that this investigation is critical and must continue to unfold, ensuring we all remain synchronized on this journey of discovery. The transition from a direct observation by the Dingir to governance by human kings, and later by priesthoods, necessitated the placement of subtle signals in the stones themselves. Look at the immense megalithic structures that defy the known capabilities of the emergent post-Anunnaki civilizations. Structures perfectly aligned with astronomical cycles that seem to track the precise orbital path of an absent body. These structures, built with impossible precision, were not temples built for worship. They were markers, navigational aids, vast terrestrial signs visible from orbit, ensuring the returning Anunnaki could verify the health and status of the project from afar. These ancient observatories and massive pyramids, far from being tombs or religious shrines, might serve the function of colossal dormant infrastructure, waiting for the correct celestial signature to reactivate. And this leads to the most chilling possibility concerning the Anunnaki absence: the silent watchers. Did all of them leave? The tablets suggest a formal departure, a withdrawal of the main contingent. But the same texts are replete with references to semi-divine beings who remained, or who were stationed in the depths of the earth, guardians of the forbidden knowledge, keepers of the laboratories, or perhaps simply maintenance units for dormant technology. These silent watchers are the source of global myths concerning underground cities and hidden masters, a small dedicated cadre ensuring that the genetic and social conditions remain stable until the mandated return. Their existence implies that the Earth has never truly been unsupervised, only monitored from a deeper, less visible layer of reality. The great inheritance passed down to the human priesthoods, the first guardians of civilization, was therefore an inheritance built upon a lie, a necessary distortion of reality. They were given profound, terrifying cosmic knowledge, but were simultaneously instructed to translate it into accessible, manipulative religious narratives to keep the masses obedient and focused on labor. The original Anunnaki protocol, the understanding of physics, astronomy, and genetic science contained in the deepest levels of the Sumerian archives, was cloistered, hidden behind veils of ritual and esoteric language. This guaranteed that when the celestial patrons eventually returned, the planetary structure would be ready for their inspection, intact and obedient, ruled by structures that had their genesis in the Anunnaki command codes. The result is that our present reality, our deepest beliefs, our geopolitical structures, are not the result of pure organic human evolution, but the slow, complex unfolding of a highly specific extraterrestrial management plan. This persistent historical distortion creates a profound sense of temporal and intellectual uneasiness. We are left asking, if the Anunnaki departure was merely a function of their orbital cycle, then what happens when that cycle completes? The Sumerian astronomical records, which demonstrate a frightening accuracy concerning celestial mechanics, clearly outline the orbital characteristics of this rogue planet, Nibiru. The looming horizon is not a metaphorical threat. It is an astronomical certainty woven into the fabric of the earliest human civilizations. The texts that speak of their coming are matched only by the texts that speak of their return. The approaching cycle suggests a potential re-emergence, an orbital alignment that will once again place the physical presence of the Anunnaki within our sphere of influence. This convergence, detailed in ancient prophecies misinterpreted as apocalyptic warnings, could signify the moment when the administrators return to check on the progress of their harvest, to examine the fruits of their prolonged genetic and social experiment. What we do not know, and what the tablets only hint at with terrifying ambiguity, is the unspoken protocol. What defines success or failure in their eyes? Will they return merely to observe, to extract necessary resources and leave us to our continued self-governance? Or will they deem the experiment tainted, requiring a complete reset, a new intervention, a new creation, perhaps a new great flood to wash away the inconsistencies? If we accept the premise that our species was genetically engineered for a specific function, then our continued existence is contingent upon our current utility to the project's original architects. To stand here now, peering across the vast expanse of time through the fragile lens of fired clay, is to confront the terrifying possibility that our destiny is not our own, but rather a variable awaiting calibration by forces beyond our comprehension. This realization must sharpen our focus as we move towards the final revelations. If you have stayed with us through the deciphering of the language, the analysis of the genetic manipulation, and the exploration of the immense cycles of time, then you are ready for the culmination of this investigation. You understand the weight of the evidence and the profound implications of these ancient Sumerian tablets on the history of human origins. The final part of this series will delve into the most direct evidence of the Anunnaki's long-term plan and what specific clues exist today, pointing towards the current phase of the cycle. Do not let this knowledge dissolve into the digital background. Show your commitment to this deeper truth by ensuring you are subscribed to the channel now. And if this dense historical journey has illuminated a new perspective for you, please press the like button. For those dedicated few who journeyed to the end of this profound discussion, please solidify your dedication by commenting below with the exact phrase, "The cycle is closing." We will see you in the next and final chapter, as we turn the last tablet and confront the implications of the looming horizon. The investigation continues immediately on the screen before you. What if the most profound questions we ask about ourselves, who we are, why we are here, and what our true potential might be, are not philosophical quandaries, but rather the echoes of an instruction manual we have forgotten how to read? We have traversed the dense landscape of cuneiform script, followed the celestial alignments described in the Eridu Genesis, and meticulously reconstructed the narrative of the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. The evidence, once dismissed as mere mythology, coalesces now into a startlingly coherent account of creation, intervention, and cyclical return. But after navigating 8 extensive parts of this journey, we must confront the terminal point of this investigation, the definitive implications of these ancient Sumerian tablets for the human species today. The knowledge we have uncovered does not merely redefine history, it recontextualizes our entire existence, moving us from the status of biological natives to that of designed stewards. The final culmination of the Sumerian record suggests a profound, lingering uncertainty built into the fabric of our existence. We have examined the Enuma Elish, the tablets detailing the creation of Lulu Amalu, the composite worker, engineered primarily for physical labor in the gold mines of the Abzu. But while the initial motivation was practical, even desperate, The tablets hint that the genetic fusion of the hominid Homo erectus and the sophisticated genome of the Anunnaki yielded an unintended outcome, a creature possessing the divine spark of accelerated consciousness. This wasn't merely a worker. It was a flawed, accelerated mirror of its creators. And here lies the enduring paradox, the first great mystery in our final act. Were the Anunnaki truly finished with their creation? Or did the success, even in its imperfection, ensure that humanity would forever remain tethered to their ancient project? Consider the sheer scale of the historical amnesia that followed the Great Deluge, the cataclysmic event detailed in so many global myths, yet described by the Sumerians as a deliberate, or at least anticipated, consequence of celestial cycles and planetary alignments. Why was the foundational knowledge of our origins not merely lost, but seemingly obliterated from mainstream memory, surviving only in fragmented, coded narratives locked within inaccessible ancient languages? It is as if a cosmic switch was deliberately flipped, ensuring that the nascent human civilization, having survived the flood, would rebuild itself under the foundational assumption of isolation, believing itself to be the unique and final result of random terrestrial evolution. This systematic erasure, if intentional, suggests a management protocol, a mechanism put in place by the original architects to allow their creation to mature, but perhaps also to forget the true nature of its genesis. This brings us to a moment of deep, unsettling recognition. If the tablets hold the truth, we are not history's protagonists, but rather the legacy of a necessary, forgotten operational chapter. As we stand at this precipice of understanding, having traced the golden thread through millennia, it is imperative that we recognize the magnitude of this shift in perspective. If these detailed accounts resonate with something deep within your own intuition, if they make the scattered pieces of history finally fall into place, I encourage you to pause and internalize this realization. This investigation is less about definitive answers and more about cultivating profound, intelligent questions. If you are finding the connections unsettling yet compelling, take a moment to engage with this material beyond passive consumption. Sharing your thoughts below, perhaps using the word inheritance to mark your place in the discussion, helps illuminate this complex path for others who seek these truths. Your active participation in dissecting these possibilities is crucial, as the collective act of recognition is often the first step toward decoding a forgotten blueprint. If you haven't yet, considering subscribing and liking this video ensures that this crucial dialogue remains active and visible in a world prone to historical oblivion. The inherent imperfection built into the Lulu Amalu, the accelerated lifespan, the vulnerability to disease, the need for constant, laborious intervention, was, according to the tablets, not an evolutionary flaw, but a deliberate genetic dampener. The Anunnaki, specifically Enki and Ninhursag, had imparted knowledge and longevity, but Enlil's faction mandated constraints to prevent the hybrid species from achieving parity with their creators too swiftly. This genetic ceiling represents the key to understanding our current existential frustrations, the feeling that we are constantly grasping for something just beyond our reach, held back by unseen biological and cognitive limitations. This uneasiness is the psychological residue of an engineered species that has forgotten its parameters. We carry the burden of the Anunnaki's sophisticated DNA, capable of monumental creation and abstract thought, yet constrained by the terrestrial hominid's fragility, creating a permanent state of longing and existential conflict. The concept of the Anunnaki cycles becomes central to this final revelation. If they came for a resource, and that resource still exists, why assume the project has been fully abandoned? Sumerian astronomical observations, tied meticulously to the orbital periods of their celestial home, Nibiru, suggest a pattern of presence and absence governed by predictable astrophysical mechanics. The tablets do not describe a permanent colonization, followed by an extinction event. They describe intermittent visitation governed by a long, elliptic trajectory. Every time the planet or space station referred to in the texts completes its passage through the inner solar system, the potential for interaction or intervention dramatically increases. We are approaching a crucial astronomical marker point, a zero point in the grand cycle, where the distance between the Earth and the source of our genetic blueprint shortens considerably. This recognition shifts the historical narrative into a future projection, transforming the question of where did we come from into the vastly more urgent question of when might they return. The great forgetting, the purposeful or accidental erasure of the true Genesis narrative, served a function, allowing the human population to expand and thrive without the psychological constraints of knowing they were fundamentally a disposable labor force. Yet, the same texts that detail the history also contain the seeds of the return trajectory. Certain ancient structures, certain megalithic alignments, and even the esoteric knowledge preserved in mystery schools worldwide all point toward complex signaling mechanisms, perhaps left behind as orbital markers or communication relays. If we are indeed the inheritors of an accelerated program, we must consider that our rapid technological and cultural leaps, especially in the last few centuries, might be less a spontaneous phenomenon and more a scheduled maturation, a phase of development anticipated by the original architects. The capacity for atomic physics, for advanced mathematics, and for space travel is not random. It is the activated sequence of the Anunnaki genetic blueprint, stirring from its long slumber. This leads us to the most powerful and unnerving conclusion suggested by the totality of the Sumerian literature. The Anunnaki may not be figures of the distant past, but persistent observers of the present. If their existence is intrinsically tied to a resource, gold, and if their lineage is directly responsible for our rapid evolutionary pace, then the possibility of watchers among us ceases to be science fiction and becomes a plausible operational necessity. They may not reside in magnificent cities visible to the naked eye, but their presence might be maintained through monitoring stations, through hybridized descendants who remained, or through the subtle manipulation of global affairs to ensure the stability of their proprietary asset. Us, the workforce, the stewards, the experimental subject. The tablets paint a picture of highly advanced beings deeply invested in the outcome of their own creation, reluctant to abandon a project into which they poured so much knowledge and resource, including their own genetic material. We are left with the final inheritance. The Sumerian tablets, weathered artifacts of clay, tell us that we are neither purely terrestrial nor purely divine, but a complex, engineered bridge between two worlds. Our restlessness, our pursuit of the stars, our relentless questioning of authority and origin are not errors in the system. They are the intended features of the Anunnaki strain within us. The definitive conclusion of this extensive investigation is that the human story is not one of spontaneous ascent, but one of managed stewardship under the shadow of a forgotten lineage. We are the living record, the most enduring artifact of an intergalactic mission conducted eons ago. And our greatest responsibility now is not simply to understand history, but to prepare for the inevitable future collision between our developed civilization and the cyclical return of those who instigated it all. If you have stayed through the entirety of this 8-part journey, absorbing the complexity of these ancient revelations, you understand that this is more than mere speculation. It is an investigation into the deepest layers of recorded human history. If this knowledge resonates, if you feel the weight of this extraordinary inheritance, please acknowledge this journey by pressing the like button and ensuring you are subscribed to the channel. We will continue to explore the artifacts and the anomalies that mainstream history ignores. To share your profound understanding and mark your commitment to seeking these truths, I ask that you comment the specific phrase, "We are the inheritance." Our next investigation will turn toward the global impact of this knowledge, examining how other ancient cultures, from the Egyptians to the Maya, echoed the same cosmic narrative of intervention. Until then, keep questioning everything and look up to the sky with renewed understanding.